When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We're back, and this is episode 107, Vanilla versus Webflow. I'm Matt, that's Mike, and this week we'll be discussing vanilla code versus Webflow. Then later we'll discuss how many hours we should spend coding in our web news. Now, if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us on our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And now it's time for our weekly pain points. So, Mike, please take it away.
Yeah, so this weekly pain point is going to be kind of a joined weekly pain point with Matt and I, because we had a discussion before the podcast about what we've been feeling these last couple weeks, and I think we both landed on the same thing. So we're both kind of feeling anxiety a little bit. I realized a little while ago, I kind of went to the doctors because I was having kind of asthma symptoms, and the doctor's like, well, you seem fine in terms of asthma, but it could be something like anxiety. Like it could be, I was having weird things where I was just like, taking a lot of deep breaths for no reason. Like it didn't feel like, and then I was like yawning a lot, which means I didn't have enough oxygen. But ever since that I learned that it was anxiety, like most likely, I felt a little bit better. It's like, when you diagnose it, because I had this feeling like when it got bad and I would start like breathing like really deeply and then like starting to lose breath a little bit, I would panic because of that situation. Because I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like, is this asthma? Is this not? Whatever. Now that I know what it is, I kind of just try to relax myself, and it has made it better. So that's kind of been what I'm dealing with for the last couple of weeks. It's gotten better, but obviously there's still a lot of things in the world that are causing anxiety. So I have to catch myself and give myself proper breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's I think it's a communal, or it's like a joint pain point, because I think it's a lot of the anxiety in general is for everybody, and not just us, because of the world, the whole coronavirus things. There's various things happening across the world, different political situations or whatever it is. Like there's just a lot kind of happening. I've personally had a bunch of like people like pass away sadly in my family. Some people are sick as well, and then like I've noticed. For me, it's not an asthma thing, so I haven't had to go to a doctor, luckily. That sounds pretty bad, but it's been like, I get worried about like something that's completely random, and I'm consciously being like, I'm not worried about this, but like my brain keeps bringing it up. You know how like if something is nagging at you, like, hey, you need to do whatever thing, and it keeps like coming up, no matter what you're doing. I'm having that, but like with really like inanimate and like useless things. Like yesterday, for example, like, my HDMI like cut out for like a second. Now, I have like a receiver and all these HDMI things, so sometimes they come loose. Normal thing, whatever, has happened like 100 million times. Go back there, unplug it, plug it back in. For whatever reason, worried about that the entire night. And like I consciously know it's fine, and I'm like using the TV and everything, and like it's a TV, I can always like get another one, but it's like that just stuck in my head. Like I had to like replace a caster on my bed, and like I was worried about that. But, like, I've done that before. I know how to do it. But, like, for whatever reason, it's just, like, one of those things where it's, like, as I go through my day, if something goes wrong, even if it's something super small, of which something will always go wrong, it just, like, sticks in my head, like, as if it's something serious. And that keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. And I don't know what it is. And usually, for me, I'm worried and I actually don't know what I'm worried about. Or I either don't know or I do know. In this case, it's, like, I'm telling myself, like, dude, like, it's a caster. I'm gonna go buy it. It's like $10, whatever. And then I gotta pull it out and put the new one in. It is so simple. But for whatever reasons, like, my brain keeps coming back and be like, hey, you gotta change that caster. You gotta change the caster. What if something breaks on the bed? What? Caster. It's like, what is going on? So I think it is like the state of the world and the state of things, because like yesterday I tripped on like a phone cable, and I was worried about that. And then later the HDMI thing happened. Then I was worried about that and wasn't worried about the phone cable anymore. So it's just like, I keep, like, it's like a queue of, like, stuff, and it just pushes the previous thing out. So I think it's just the state of, like I said, there's some health issues going on in my family and stuff, and there's just a lot going on. I think that's it, to be honest, but I don't know. I don't know whether anyone else is out there suffering from the same thing, but it ain't great. Mike's situation ain't great either, but I think like I said, the reason why it's a joint is because I believe, coming from a non-doctor background, that I believe it's probably like just everything happening all at once, and our brain is like adapting in some way.
Yeah. I think it's also important to just kind of get it out there and talk about it a little bit. It does help. That's the thing. Like, if you just internalize it in yourself and you just keep thinking, oh, is something wrong with me? Is something wrong with me? Is something wrong with me? And you never say it to anyone, or you don't, do anything about it, it just becomes worse and worse and worse with it. So that's why it was a good idea to talk about this right now during the pain point.
Yes.
Because everyone experiences something different when it comes to anxiety, I think. And it's just important to know that it could be that, you know what I mean? Like, it could just be a mental thing, or it could be, the stuff that's surrounding the world right now is crazy, and you could be taking it in a different way than you've taken everything else in your life, and it could be causing some issues. So just, talk to someone about it.
And the thing is too, is another, like, not to make this super long-winded, but I think it's important, like you're saying, to talk about, and this can affect, developers as well as anyone in any profession. And it can affect, like, the amount of anxiety can affect your work. But also, in my experience, I'm actually more worried on days off or time off, because I'm now no longer thinking about that latest client project, that latest stream. I'm now, like, alone in my thoughts. And so, like, whenever I have, like, I'll, like, block off a day and be like, I'm just going to play some games today. Because that's sort of like my that's sort of like my ultimate downtime. I'm just going to play some games. I'll, like, find something to worry about that whole day. And it's that stupid thing, like I said again, where, like, it's nothing to actually worry about. It's not like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. It's just like, for whatever reason, I just get super, and then you get that, like, feedback loop where I'm being worried, and I'm worried about, like, ruining my day off, and then I'm worried about the fact that I'm worrying about the fact that I'm worried, and it's like this, like, constant. And it's not, like, debilitating for me, luckily. Like, I'm very much like a person where I'm just an anxious person in general, usually. So I just still do stuff. Like, it doesn't debilitate me in that way, but it doesn't make stuff, whatever I'm doing, games or going out or whatever, as enjoyable. And it does, even if we don't, like, necessarily see it, it does affect work. You'll miss an email or, something, whatever it is. So I just think it's important to maybe, like you're saying, just to sort of say it, because I guess content creators, some talk about it, but, like, some don't. Like, some very much are either they're literally a character for the camera, or their own. Obviously, like, social media is, you don't want to constantly talk about, like, you being anxious, right? So you kind of, like, stop that stuff. But I think it's important to acknowledge that, yes, like, even content creators, even though we're not, like, 10 million subscribers and all the rest of it, even content creators can get it. And some content creators, to their credit, do talk about it, but I just think it's important to talk about. But what we're here to talk about today is actually just Webflow. So I've been doing some streams on Webflow. If you haven't checked those out, go check it out on twitch.tv/HTML all the things. And I've been building the HTML All the Things website. It's slow and quick going, so I'm slowly getting going a little bit faster, but I'm explaining myself as I go, and also playing with Grid. I've never actually used CSS Grid. I think I used it, like, once, like, to lay something out, and I think I wrote an article about it, and that's literally all my experience with it. So I've never used it in I've never used it in actual production, rather. So, but I kind of want to talk about Webflow because we've had an interesting conversation on Twitter about this, and, like, obviously during the streams as well. And so I kind of want to talk about, why Webflow, and then, a compare and contrast as to what is similar to vanilla. So, like, vanilla HTML, CSS, JS type thing. And then what's different from vanilla in Webflow as well. And, like, why Webflow is so powerful, and maybe some caveats and pros and cons, those type of things. We'll just kind of have a general conversation. So the first segment here is called Why Webflow. Now, this segment's just going to be sort of almost like an introduction to Webflow, and just sort of talking about it as, like, kind of like a boilerplate for our second segment, compare and contrast sort of conversation. So, Webflow obviously is a website maker that gives the website creator virtually full control over the user interface with just the Webflow designer alone. So that's like a component or a tool in Webflow where you build the actual site. It's called the designer, or the Webflow designer, as I'm referring to it here. Unlike many other designers that rely on pre-built components and widgets, Webflow creations are almost built entirely out of components that are created within and controlled by Webflow. So if you've ever used WordPress, if you've ever used Squarespace, has a fair bit of them. It's been a while since I've used Squarespace now, but if you use like a website editor, oftentimes you drag and drop in an Instagram feed widget, and you really, you may have some customizations, like a little bit of padding, a little bit of margin, maybe changing the background color. But if you wanted it to be, instead of horizontal, be vertical, usually you're kind of out of luck unless there's a control for that. So Webflow is very much built like an actual website. So not to get into the compare and contrast already, but it very much is, it's built like you literally put it together. So for example, if you buy a template, and we'll talk about this shortly as well, but like if you buy a template in Webflow, for example, and you go into the nav bar, let's say it's a really easy nav bar, you have your links laid out on the right, you have social buttons also laid out on the right, and then a logo on the left, real easy. When you click in, it's not like you click into an editor and then you upload a logo and change the links in like some sort of weird drop down. No. Like you are clicking on the div that houses the nav bar, and then clicking into the nested div that houses those text components. And then those text components or link blocks or whatever they are, usually link blocks, they are in that div, and you can go in and you can change the hierarchy and do everything you want. And that's from like a purchase Webflow template. So you're given a lot more control, but you're still given like that pre-built nature. So someone built that whole thing in Webflow. They didn't click navbar, please, So that's sort of what it is. Now, there are some pre-built things in Webflow, which we'll get into. But basically what this allows you to do as the creator, the website creator, you can use your already, hopefully, vast knowledge of HTML and CSS to navigate that Webflow designer, to navigate that Webflow interface. And that is really powerful in putting together your own interfaces. So for example, if you wanted to lay something out using just Flexbox, you literally click a button that's like, display flex, and then you adjust the justify content and the line items properties, again with buttons in the interface, as needed. And common controls, obviously, padding, margin, you got to know what those are, and there's a visual control for that, but you are using that. And so you're effectively, you are using your knowledge of HTML and CSS to put this together, but you're also keeping it fresh as well. Like I will sometimes go back, because I've been working on Webflow quite a bit recently, I will sometimes go back and forget a property name. Like I'll, maybe put in like display, like box instead of like block or something, just something where I'm just messing it up a little bit, but I know what I mean, and I can easily look it up and kind of like self-correct. And so I'm still keeping it fresh. And I'm still keeping it fresh in my mind, and I'm not like forgetting everything. It's not like I'm going to an entirely different syntax. I'm still using the syntax, but I'm just not typing it in. So it's easy enough to kind of go back and forth, and I'm only like missing like the odd little thing here and there, and it's easily mended by looking it up. Now, with that being said, Webflow is an editor, right? It is a creator, it is a tool, and it does come with some of those proprietary controls, such as things called symbols, which I'll get into, and other CMS controls. However, many of them rely entirely on working within vanilla code. So, for example, symbols is a good one. So symbols is a proprietary thing that Webflow has, but it relies on you using those vanilla controls, like I said, using the Webflow interface to build something. So symbols are used for repeatable regions within Webflow. Something like a navbar is on almost every page, a footer on almost every page, if not every page, right? Of course. And so those are repeatable things. And so what you do is you build out your navbar, you build the navbar out with all your controls, your divs, your text blocks, your link blocks, your iconography, whatever you need to put in there, your images. And then you take that and you go, I want to put this on every website. And so you want to make it into a component that you can just insert. You make it into what's called a symbol, and then when you go to other pages, or even if you need it repeatedly on that page for some reason, you can go in and just like click where you need it and press add, and then symbols, and then click on the one you made. So the nav bar in this particular case, and it's just a really easy way to add repeatable components. And more recently, we were experimenting on stream as well with this. More recently, they added a way to have distinct edits per symbol. So like I said, symbols is like a Webflow system. So for example, if you put the company name as HTML all the things in a text block in that navbar, across the whole website it says HTML all the things. If you want to change that to literally just say HATT, HAT, the acronym, you can do that, but it would change it across everything. But let's say, for example, for whatever reason on the privacy policy page, I don't know, you do not want to have HTML all the things. You want it to say hat on that page, but every other page HTML all the things. You can now insert like dynamic variables. I forget what Webflow exactly calls it, but you can insert dynamic variables so that you can actually change on one symbol and not the others while keeping the structure of the rest of the symbol the same. So that's super, super useful. Actually, there's been a few times where I've had to make two symbols like navbar and new navbar and then have to use the two. And then if I need to update one, I got to update the other, and it's like all manual. Now it's more automatic. So stuff like that is very much like a Webflow component. There's nothing in CSS that necessarily makes that, right? There's nothing that you say like CSS generate symbol, now use symbol. There's nothing like that. That's very much a proprietary control in Webflow, but still reliant in this case on that sort of vanilla code type thing. Now, if you don't want to use, the Webflow CMS, because they will include an optional CMS, and you would prefer to just use Webflow as a designing tool, you can absolutely do that. You can export your code. So Webflow will export your code, HTML, CSS, and JS, so that you can use it as needed. Now, whether you're going to be hosting that website somewhere else as a static site, or whether you plan on using that sort of interface that you built and then just add a bunch of functionality with maybe other plugins that you have that aren't like Webflow compatible, or you want to do it on your own infrastructure, or you have another CMS that you want to use. That's a common one. Absolutely, you can do that. And so Webflow can absolutely just become a tool that your maybe design team, if you're in an agency, use, and then you guys maybe host it for cheaper somewhere else, because Webflow hosting can get a little expensive. Or maybe you have a big corporate client, a big website that's coming out, and so you build all the components in there, and you want to use something like Typo3 or Joomla, or even just WordPress. If you want, you can retrofit it in so that like, hey WordPress, this is my UI. And then I don't do that, so I've never done it myself, but I know that you can sort of make CMSs, especially WordPress and that type of thing, work within it. Couch CMS, if you want a smaller CMS, for example, all easy enough to do. Now, the designer, even lets you embed your own code as needed, which extends the functionality of Webflow where it falls short. So literally there's like an embed block. So when you go and add something into Webflow, you click a little plus, I think it's just an add button. And then you go down, you can just add an embed block. If memory serves, I believe that's what it's called. But you can add like an embed block, and you can put whatever you want in there. So you can add your own script tags in there and write your own JS. You can also put in you can actually put in, sometimes it won't render it. Like it won't render the JS live into the designer just by design, obviously. But if you make your own, if you just have like a code snippet that you use constantly for something, you can just put that in. Like if you have a standard title with a wrapper around it or something, you can put that in, and oftentimes the designer will actually render that live so you can see it as well. And that's super helpful, and it's something that extends the functionality of Webflow where there's maybe some shortcomings, or maybe where you want to do something very, very, very specific as well. Now, that kind of concludes the first segment, but I do want to point out that obviously there's a bunch to talk about on Webflow. So, there's some examples that you were thinking of that I never covered. There's a bunch of examples of, proprietary functions and that type of thing. We might touch on it in the second segment, but just something to keep in mind that Webflow is a big tool, has a lot of functions, and these are just sort of the things that came to mind, stuff that I sort of hit every day or commonly enough when I'm using Webflow on the projects that I'm using it on.
So, question for you, Matt.
Yep.
Have you ever done the export to HTML, CSS, and JS?
No, but on stream I did take a look. If you go press the export button, I think I may have to upgrade my plan right now or something to do that. But right now, if you look at it, if you press the export button, it lets you look at it. So you can take a look and it'll, there's tabs, HTML, CSS, JS, and you can come and take a look at what it built.
How clean is the code? Is it readable, or is it all minified and tough to edit?
No, it's definitely readable. Really, really readable. I want to say it's recently. I don't know whether there was a control that I missed earlier, but I do know that when you publish now, there somewhere. So I'm just kind of talking from rough memory, but they added a minified JS and something else control as well. I believe that's for more or less like when you publish, so that it, so that it's like minified like on in production effectively. But I don't think it does that on export. I've never actually fully exported. I've only kind of looked at that preview, so I can't comment. And I'm not sure when they added that minify control either. I just recently noticed it. So just something to keep in mind. But you can minify in that in production if you're using Webflow as your host as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it would make sense to me if on the export it wouldn't be minified and it would be in like very readable format, because like you said, if you want to extend the functionality of the site or if you want to add your own CMS hooks into there, you would need it to be. Otherwise, it's going to be like gibberish, right? Like if it's minified, all the variables are going to be like A, B, C, D, like, you know what I mean? All one letter, really simple variables that aren't human readable. But if it's not minified, then it might be a lot easier. I'm just curious, like, I think that's something that I might look into at some point, is I want to see what the non-minified or what the export actually looks like. So maybe we can do like a combined stream or something and check it out.
Yeah, that'd be cool to like maybe you want to have like a Vue.js project or something, and you can see how to like interface with it. I don't know what, like, I mean, you know more about Vue.js than me, so, but it'd be cool to like maybe, I don't know, build a single page in Vue.js or something and have it interface with a Webflow site and see, you know, an exported Webflow site and see how that works together and how easy it is to work, and maybe even throw a CMS in there or something just as an experiment, not necessarily a production project, but
yeah, absolutely.
So we'll jump right in right now to the second segment, which is the compare and the contrast. So I got two sort of subsections in here. So I have, you know, similar to vanilla and then different from vanilla. Easy enough. So jump into the first one, similar to vanilla. Many of your knowledge, or I guess I should have put much of your knowledge of vanilla code, is already applicable when transferring to Webflow. Like I said, with that flexbox control, the margin, the position. I didn't mention that before, but the margin as well, or the position. Sorry, where you can, you know, set position, relative, absolute, static, whatever else, those type of things. All that obviously uses your knowledge of HTML, CSS, and, you know, some JS here and there. And this is also, I just want to point out, this is similar to how Tailwind CSS utilizes classes that build upon your existing knowledge of CSS. So obviously, if you're just using vanilla HTML, CSS, you know, putting in, you know, classes that are in Tailwind CSS, like dnone and stuff like that, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I used Tailwind, but, you know, if you put like dnone or something, that's not going to display none. But it's using your knowledge of CSS if you already know the two. So, you know, you install Tailwind CSS, and now in your head, you're thinking, I need to do a CSS display none. You can just do, again, if I remember the class name correctly, you can just do like a d-none in the class with with Tailwind installed, and it just does it without you having to go to your CSS file and do it. And so I think that that's maybe why Tailwind is picking up. Like I see a lot of Tailwind sort of praise on Twitter a lot like that, and personally on Webflow myself, I'm praising it a bunch. I think this is actually sort of where the praise comes from, where instead of you learning like a whole new syntax and everything else, like you are learning a new syntax, but it's like very similar to what you already know, and it's extremely similar to, you know, what your thought is. Like it's almost like as if they take your thoughts and lower the bandwidth to the project, if that makes sense. So instead of you know, typing in, you know, class like just dnone without Tailwind, you know, dnone, then you go to your CSS, you make, you know, dot dnone, and then in the curly brackets display, you know, none. That's like kind of like that's kind of like a slow bandwidth. It's kind of like a slow interaction. It's a slow addition to your project, but you can just stay in your HTML effectively to do that dnone with Tailwind, and you're still thinking of the same thing. And again, having not been a Tailwind developer for a long time, Tailwind, I mean, I've used it like once or maybe twice, but Tailwind like has its proprietary different things, of course, but it comes with the baseline tools that keep your mind refreshed. So you could realistically, easily, theoretically, jump from Webflow to vanilla, you know, writing your own project, to Tailwind, and jump all around. And so that even adds more sort of cred, if you will, to Mike and my statement where we say you should learn HTML or vanilla HTML, CSS, JS. Because if these tools and these frameworks and these libraries and whatever start getting more UXified for people that understand the code underneath, so like you didn't jump in and learn learn Tailwind, you jumped in and you learned CSS, and then you wanted something easier, so then you jumped into Tailwind. Right? It adds more cred to learning that vanilla stuff, because yes, you could transfer over to something like what's what's the syntax that React uses? JSX. Like JSX is, like you can learn it, and like, having vanilla JS helps. We're like understanding structure and stuff like that, but it's a bigger jump, if you will. Whereas this is like a very small jump, and you're using the same sort of thought process in my mind. Whereas like I kind of understand JS to the point where I can control user interfaces, as I've said time and time again. But if I want to learn React, I'm gonna have to jump into JSX, and I'm gonna have to start at the video watching stage, watch a couple videos, do the hello world, like in React specifically, obviously with JSX, and I'm gonna have to start at that phase of it. So just something to sort of note there. Also, okay, so just to switch topics, I know that was a big one. So also Webflow has the advantage, just from a pure UX perspective, of previewing the majority of your design. Like I said, some custom embedded stuff does not render live. However, you can view that design across how it would look on all the different browsers and across different devices. So you can easily check different breakpoints, and you can even see, as you drag, it'll tell you like, this is for an iPhone whatever, this is for like a Nexus whatever, this is for an iPad Pro, this is for whatever. So it'll tell you. So you have this visual editor, and honestly, like when I go like production like big time, I will check on all the browsers, I'll check on Firefox and all the rest of it. But when I'm adding small changes, I don't even check. The Webflow designer is so good at rendering what the actual website's going to show. I've seen, actually, like, not screwing around, I've seen one glitch, and it was with a nav bar not rendering the menu like at the same location. So for whatever reason, I had to like put a huge top property on it, and I don't know why that was, but on the actual browsers, it was rendering it like 200 pixels down, and I had to like move it up 200 pixels and then on the Webflow thing, it was like thinking that it was way up in the air, but that's not how it was. But that was the only glitch I ever encountered. I don't know whether it was something I did, but I never encountered it again, even on other nav bars. And that like literally, that's it. I don't check I trust the Webflow designer to show me live what things look like. And so this is just a purely UX thing where I don't know whether maybe it doesn't fit in the similar to vanilla, but what it does is it adds a UX enhancement to vanilla, where instead of you write out your code, blah 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 blah, then you got to go in, you got to like check it on Firefox and check it on here and check it on there, and yes, maybe you're using some tools that allow you to just check it on Chrome, and then like you're confident that's the way it's going to look like. But this is just like another step. Like, you have that responsivity thing. You don't have to dive into the dev tools. It's just super quick. And then I go in and I can quickly change all the breakpoints or like quickly change like certain elements at certain breakpoints and those type of things. It's just like a really nice experience. And the editor, the designer in this case, is right there. It's super easy for me to use. And it's not overbearing. And it's just a really good UX experience is basically what I'm getting at. Not to like toot its horn too much, but it is super nice and super not glitchy, which is kind of, when I started, I thought it was going to be glitchy as hell, and I just ended up not testing in other browsers for the most part. So
another huge advantage of that, what you were just saying, the designer being so good and so reliable, is that's another step that you would take away from onboarding another employee. So if you had to pass off this project to someone else, and we were to bring someone else, usually what you have to do is you have to set up their environment, and that takes time. And sometimes it takes multiple days because you forget a couple things here and there. And what that leads to is unneeded development. It leads to a bunch of time that's not actually development time, right? It's necessary a lot of times. If you have a complicated stack, it's absolutely necessary and it's important to do. But with Webflow, it's kind of just like plug and play. Like it's all on the browser. You don't need, like, I'm assuming you don't even use VS Code for a Webflow project, correct? Like everything's on the browser.
No, I do everything. I literally just log in and start doing it.
Exactly. So that's like the person that you would be bringing on would be doing the exact same thing. They don't need any plugins. They don't need any dev tool plugin installations. They don't need any, like you said, it tests all the different browsers for you. It tests all the different browser sizes. It's a huge advantage and a huge time saving and a huge consistency factor for your website design, because a big problem in the industry for a startup especially is that onboarding process, because it takes up a lot of time. And usually in a startup, everyone's working like 100% ham, like I'm experiencing it right now. And even spending an hour a day or 2 hours a day to onboard someone is not enough time. And I know that's a problem in itself, but it's a problem that's kind of like, if there's a tool that can help you with that, you're going to use it. So if Webflow is something that fits into your workflow, then you could use that to also solve the onboarding problem and also get everyone on the same kind of page in terms of a development environment.
That's a really interesting thing. I didn't actually even really think of that, is the fact that I'm effectively, what Webflow is actually doing is it's sort of modernizing like a workflow as many web apps modernize workflows in other industries, where realistically you could give, netbooks aren't really a thing anymore, but realistically you could give somebody a netbook if they're in your business. And if you guys are in the Google infrastructure, you guys use all the Google productivity tools, you could so easily give them a Google Drive access and just allow them to use Google Docs and that type of thing. That is why Chromebooks, especially the underpowered ones, are totally usable, because the workflow of many workflows like writers and stuff like that has been sort of modernized and has been moved, or could be moved easily, from local computing, like using Word, to things like Word Online or Google Docs or whatever. And so Webflow is just, I guess, another one of those pieces where you're no longer, you got the VS Code, and you got your VS Code plugins, and then, you're NPMing all your packages in, and you're making sure that your, CMD is running in this, and you make sure you're on an admin account or whatever, and you're getting your directory structure all set up, and or your folder structure or whatever, and you don't have that. I don't bother with that. If someone asks me, hey, I need you to change this image, it's not a matter of me jumping in and being like, where the hell is this path? I literally jump in and go like, oh, click here, click the cog. Click here. Okay. Looks like the image is good. Publish. Send them a text. It's done. And it's so quick, in fact, and I've mentioned this before on the show, it's so quick, in fact, that we have a client that's more hands-on, and I've been live with him on the phone for like 2 hours, and I just did a bunch of the changes for him. And some of the changes I'll say, hey, that's going to take me a little bit, or I want to see what type of solution I come up with, or whether I'm going to embed a plugin, because you can embed stuff into Webflow, of course, like I said. But I'm going to, maybe I want to embed something, or maybe I can, manipulate or utilize a Webflow system. Like, maybe that's, like, maybe it would take more time, is I guess what I'm saying. But the point is, like, a lot of those easy changes I can just do live with him right on the phone. And then the other changes I can take back, but it's only a day wait. It's not like a huge wait anymore. And so it's modernizing that workflow, modernizing that experience. I think we'll move on to the next subsection here, which is different from vanilla. So Webflow does offer some pre-built components, as I've said, and they allow you to continue working without redesigning the wheel. So I'll touch on a couple other ones. I already talked about symbols. That's very much a Webflow system, but sliders. Webflow has sliders, like has a slider component. You can add or remove sliders, those type of things. Light boxes, like for images, you can absolutely do that. Easy enough. And they have their pros and their cons, like they're easy to use, but if you want to really get into it, like Webflow, the sliders are really customizable in that you can add your own divs and stuff like that into them. But then there's some limitations where, the editor, so we're talking about the designer where you create stuff. If you're giving someone who is not technical an editor account just to edit, there's some limitations in what they can edit in there and that type of thing. So there's just some of those sort of, what do you call them? I guess they're limitations of any sort of product like this, where they've designed it a certain way at a certain UX level. This is how they expect people to want to edit it. And then Mike and I have run into a couple of times where people are like, hey, why can't I change this? And then I've had to make my own quick slider out of just embedded JS just because they wanted to do more specific editing. But it comes with the territory, and and having the sliders and the light boxes and those type of things are nice to have. Also, navbar text, so specifically the ability to control and change from the fully laid out menu options versus a navicon with a toggleable menu, or a hamburger menu, if you will, where it opens and closes. That's a Webflow mechanic. Like it doesn't. You get to select at this breakpoint. I want you to take away the menu options, and I want you to switch over to the hamburger menu or the navicon. So that's really nice to have. but that's also like proprietary, of course. Symbols also allow you to, I've already mentioned this, but symbols also allow you to administer repeatable regions throughout your website, like nav bars and footers. And then CDN specific technology. So not necessarily the CDN tech itself, I should say, but it's more like, so for example, you can shuffle your collection items. So a collection is like a CMS. So like one of your collections could be all your blog posts, for example. So if you're a person that the date doesn't matter and it's just like you just want your people to see something random, you can do like a shuffle order, which is a random order. And to make that load quickly and to make sure everyone else gets the same amount of random stuff, there's like the CDN will do that random sort, I believe it's called in the UI. So we'll do that random sort every 12 hours and everyone gets to see the same one because the CDN caches your pages and therefore your website loads fast. So it only refreshes that every 12 hours. So, I mean, that's a limitation and a plus too. It's like just something to keep in mind. But again, that's not something that's just in your HTML, CSS, JS, of course. So stuff like that. But also, I guess this would be more specifically CDN tech, is the fact that because the sites are delivered via a CDN, pages will load really fast, even if there's lots of animations and transitions and those type of things. And while we're talking about animations and transitions, Webflow calls these things interactions, I believe. And interactions are proprietary in terms of their design, layout, and creation within Webflow. So there's a whole interface. I remember when I started with Webflow, I think they were sort of toting that they had just pushed out Interactions 2.0, which was like a new way to make interactions. I think there's even a checkbox still to this day where I can say like I want to use the legacy interaction system. I've never used that, full disclosure, or at least not to my knowledge. But basically what it does is it allows you to have virtually full control over how your animations and transitions look, feel, how fast they are, how they're triggered, all those type of things, and allow this interface, you use real things, like you use vanilla properties and that type of thing, like move or like get bigger or whatever, but like the sizing and stuff like that, or like where's the X coordinate, like where is it moving type of thing, but it's in a non-vanilla interface. So for example, like instead of you having to, make a trigger for if something scrolls into view, I literally like click on this, like let's say when this text block gets scrolled into view, I want it to like spin. So what I can do is I can click on the text box, add an interaction to it, name it like text spin, and the trigger is that when it gets scrolled into view, and I'm literally just selecting this from a drop down, when it gets scrolled into view, and then it gives me like this timeline in which I can go in and I can say, okay, I'm going to at the beginning, its initial state is that it's, just sitting there. It's at 0, 0, whatever. And then when I do it, I'm going to make it spin. So you can say, you go in, you say like at 0.5 seconds in, I want it to, spin 90 degrees. And then it's going to keep, and then at another 0.5 seconds in, it's going to spin the other way. And then another 0.5 is going to spin back so that it's done like a full 360. And I can go in and literally select from drop down menus, like click at the 0.5. And then click, I think there might literally be a spin control there, so like spin or whatever. And I go in and I change the X and the Y and the Z or whatever I want it to do. Maybe if I want it to flip and spin or whatever. And so it's done in sort of a vanilla-ish way where I still have like this fine-tooth control. I'm still controlling coordinates. I'm still kind of using those, obviously, but it's very much done in a like Webflow interface. Like clearly that interface does not exist, and it's a much different experience if you're just typing out the properties, obviously, but it's in a nice way where you can preview that's the whole point, right? It's one of these UX things again where you can preview the animation, you can see how it works, you can change whether it ease in, out. There's like the whole list. You can click and you're like, do I want it to be linear? Do I want it to ease in, ease out, ease in, out? What do I want from it? You can do all kinds of stuff with it. You can change the length of the animation. You can do a whole bunch of stuff like that with it. So that concludes really my Webflow rant, I guess. But that's, as we continue with the Twitch stream, we've already seen a bunch of this, and you're gonna see a lot more of this. And I know that at least one of our viewers has switched actually on a particular project from using, just a text document or like a whatever VS Code or whatever the heck they were using, and like typing out all of their interface stuff to just using Webflow because it's faster. It's using the same knowledge bank in your brain. It's using the similar thought processes, whatever. It's just a faster way to see, interact, and create an interface, and it's the best way that I know of to buy a template if you really want to buy a template, and it's the easiest type of template to edit because it's built in Webflow already. So there's no like, how would they build this? Like WordPress templates, sure, they have their similarities, but like half those things, it's like, how are they built? You know, everyone builds things differently. But in Webflow, there's only effectively one way to build things, and that's it with the designer. So that's Webflow rant complete.
Awesome. Yeah. I think like the points you touched on with the differences are its main selling points. One thing I want to add is like being able to get the site up and live really quickly without having to, you know, mess around with htaccess files, without having to mess around with a production server, without having, you know, all that overhead when you're like, you can spend all your time essentially focused on creating sites. I think that's a huge advantage. You don't have to hire a separate DevOps person. You don't have to, you know, spend your time learning all that stuff, because it is, even though like htaccess is fairly simple, even though like a static website is an easy thing to put online nowadays with like Netlify or whatever else. It's still that like you still have to learn it. And then as soon as you put a CMS on top of that, if it's like a headless CMS, then you have to learn how to do the links between the two. And although it's fun and it's great and like, you know, it's interesting to put that time into it. And sometimes it is required because of certain functionality. When it's just a simple site and you want to get someone up and running, it's really nice to have a tool that can do it all. Whether it costs a little bit more, I think that price kind of is justified with the time savings and stuff like that. So I think it is an important tool to know when you're just trying to create a website from scratch or with a template. It is, again, like you said, it is pretty flexible in terms of the fact that it is similar to vanilla JavaScript, so you're not learning a whole new language. So it's a cool overview is what I'm trying to say. And I think it is an important skill and an important tool that people can utilize in their library. So having said that, let's move on right to web news. I got the web news this week, and I got it from a Reddit post that's been doing pretty well this last couple days. It's titled "Coding Really 8 Hours a Day," and I think it does point out a lot of good points. So I'll kind of break it down. So it's someone asking, like, when you go to work, are you actually sitting down and coding for 8 hours a day? Like if you're working from home or working in an office, is that really required when you get your first, like, you know, junior developer job or senior developer, whatever? Are you required to sit down and code for 8 hours a day? Or is there some sort of different expectations? So in a 9 to 5 kind of workflow, how much time is actually spent on coding? When you have that pressure of a new job, it can lead to a lot of expectations that you're not sure about. So when you sit down and it's your first web development job or your first development job, you kind of don't know what to expect. And if you've come from the service industry, or if you come from like a factory, you think that you just have to be always go, doing the job, and maintenance is on the side. Like you do, you know, you might think that you have to answer emails at home, or you might think that you have to do all your communications at home. And that's just not the case. I just want to like interrupt that whole thought process. Coding, in my opinion, is not an 8 hours a day job, as in like you don't, you know, open up your IDE and start coding for 8 hours a day and then stop at like 5 o'clock and, you know, do the rest of the job, because it does require a lot of communication. Especially when you're coding in a team. You have to constantly be coordinating with the team, making sure that you don't have any conflicts, making sure that you're working on the right thing, and then, you know, sending it off for testing and then getting the information back from testing and stuff like that. So whether the 9 to 5 works for everyone, that's also a question mark. But in the 9 to 5 kind of system, coding is just one part of it, because a lot of it will be taken up by communication. A lot of it will be taken up by research. A lot of it will be taken up by prep work. A lot of it will be taken up by many like meetings and stuff like that. That is built into that 9 to 5. You're not expected to code for 8 hours a day and then on top of that do all your other maintenance work. That's just not a realistic expectation of someone. Whether you've been in an agency where that you felt like that was required, that's not a good working environment, in my opinion. Now, the question is, like, should the coding hours even be measured? Like, should you report to your boss, hey, I did 3 hours of coding today? That, in my opinion, as well, is not the greatest way of doing it. Like, it should be more merit-based and it should be more task-based. So, like, your boss should know what you've accomplished that day, but I don't think it matters how many hours you spent on it, unless it's something that's, like, holding up the team. For instance, in a situation like the team needs you to work on the database link, right? And if you don't get the database link done in the next day or two, then it's going to start blocking the people that are actually going to be using that link to provide the other features. That kind of stuff, like if you're 10 hours in to that database link and you're not even close, then that 10 hours becomes relevant, right? And that's pretty much the only case that you need to worry about your hours, is when it starts to become you're spending a bunch of hours and you're not getting anything done because you need help, or you don't have enough information, or there's just an incompatibility that you can't fix, so you have to go at it from a different perspective. So that's where you can bring that up in meetings, like, hey, I've spent a lot of time on this. Shouldn't we, consider a different approach or something like that? But other than that, you shouldn't be like, hey, I spent 33 minutes working on the nav bar, and I spent 45 minutes working on this. I don't think that is a good metric to use. I think you shouldn't be requiring your employees to micromanage themselves in that way, or you shouldn't be micromanaging them in general. And to finish off, and I'll pass it off to Matt right after this, a lot of people will start comparing it to like, oh, in a restaurant or in a factory, you're like, you get to work and you're doing the same thing. You're working nonstop until you finish work, with the exception of like a break or two or something like that, whatever's required by that job. In my opinion, those comparisons are not the same for a programmer. Like this, it's not a fair comparison to make. For instance, if you compare it to like a plumber, every job is different. A plumbing job, plumbers aren't plumbing for 9 hours a day or 8 hours a day. They're not sitting there on one toilet and like, going at it for 8 hours. No, a lot of their time is spent traveling between destinations. A lot of the time is spent prepping for the plumbing work. And then a portion of that time, like a good portion, is spent on plumbing. But again, every job is different. We shouldn't be comparing it like, again, I know a lot of toxic offices will do that. They'll be like, hey, this is, you're lucky you're not in a factory, but you got to code for 8 hours a day, because in a factory, people have to work for 8 hours a day. I think that's garbage, and that's a stupid way to go about it. Because again, every job is different, the requirements are different, and the deliverables are completely different as well. So I'll pass it off to you, Matt, for your thoughts and answers to any of these questions.
Well, I kind of think this relates to the segment of the industry that tries to become like really, really productive. I get like high productivity vibes from this. Now, I know you mentioned some toxic office stuff and that type of thing, and that, that rings true too. But I think that like the thing that like right off the top of my head, I guess, is what I'm trying to say is like, when you were going through this, it just reminded me that I can't remember what podcast it was or something, but I remember there was somebody who was like a consultant, like a health consultant on a podcast I was listening to. And they said like, oh, people come to me and they ask for consultation sessions because they're programmers in Silicon Valley and they want to min-max their productivity. And I know that, I'm not going to get into the weeds of like the whole health industry now, because like I don't really know much about it. But like, we're not machines. Like, it's not like we're going to be able to be like, yeah, like if I eat these carrots, I'm going to be able to program, another 13 hours a day without even thinking. And then I'm going to go and like run on a treadmill and come back home and like my perfect family will be waiting for me. Like, that's not like a normal, realistic type of view. I just feel as though we try to treat ourselves like machines a bit too much. And that's sort of the vibe I got from this whole web news when you were introducing it. And I just don't think that that's right, because one of the things, and this might be weird for some people to think of, but I always thought it was weird when, okay, so when you're like a kid, you're always told like, oh, when you're an adult, you can do what you want. And then when you get a job as an adult, I remember I used to work in a factory. I felt it really bizarre that I had to like go to a bank one time for like a meeting, just, I don't know, arrange an account or something. I don't even remember what it was. But it was like, oh, I can't like go to the bank during their opening hours. Like, I'm going to have to like go and let like some weird, either a weekend time, use my time off, or I'm going to like, I can't go there at like 3 p.m. for some reason. And I don't know whether that's just me being weird, but I always thought like adults really can't like do what they want. And I understand like there's probably some people in the audience that are like, oh, I'm entitled or something, I'm sure. But I'm not going to, not do my work just because I had to go and do a meeting at 3. Like, if I had to go do a meeting at 3, I'm going to go do my meeting, then come back home and continue doing some work and stuff like that. I don't really get like healthy vibes, if you will, from being locked to a desk that long. Like some people, you know what I mean? Like those toxic work environments, like, I don't know. If that feels weird to me. Like, I don't know about you, Mike, but like, I just get the weirdest feeling when I say that, like, oh, I can't do anything on any weekday. It's like, well, hang on a minute. Like, what's going on here? And I get that people are working, and I get that. That's fine. But I just thought it was weird that, like, some days you're busy. Like, some days you're busy working. That's totally fine. Some days you can't do stuff. But, like, to never, like think about it. Like, not, like, screwing around here. Like, there are people out there that will never be able to go to, like, their bank or do something regular on a weekday unless they take a holiday. And for, like, a 1-hour meeting. And, like, that's such a weird thought to me. Where it's like, what are we doing?
I agree. I think that's why I was saying, like, I don't believe in the 9 to 5 culture. I don't think that should be a thing. But like, we are lucky, like you and I, because we do set our own hours and we are able to be very extremely flexible with our hours. And we understand, grind is a grind and you have to put your work in. But we also understand that, like, if you have a meeting or a doctor's appointment, you can go and take a doctor's appointment. And I know personally people that can't. Like, they can't go to a doctor's appointment at 3 p.m. or something like that, or they can't go to a doctor's appointment at 1 p.m. They have to schedule them for after work or weekends or something like that. So, and that also, that doesn't make sense to me. And the other thing is, like, that culture of, like, you have to be in the office all the time to be able to get your work done. Remember, like, a few episodes ago or a few weeks ago, I was talking about that one guy in Silicon Valley that had 3 hours commute to work.
Oh, yeah.
So he had a 3-hour commute there and a 3-hour commute back. So that means he literally didn't do anything during the week. Like, that was his entire week was traveling and job.
Yep.
And sleep. Like, there was nothing else. Like, he could not, there's no way that he can go home and, like, go out at night or something like that because he's got 6 hours of commuting. So he has to wake up super early to get to work. So it's just, that to me seems like extremely toxic culture for the person. And, like, I like what you said about, like, we're not machines. We should be, like, the work, or like the managers should be treating us like assets in terms of, we're human assets, not machine assets. And we do need our maintenance and stuff like that in terms of, like, we just need to be ourselves and we need to be able to perform. We need to be able to set our own schedule to a certain degree because, again, like what I was saying a few episodes ago, everyone has different peak work hours. And if we can align our schedule around those peak work hours, we can get a lot done. Like, if I can do more in the peak work hours of the morning for me, like those 3 or 4 hours that I have, than I can in, like, 8 hours that aren't peak, right? So that benefits the company.
Yeah, 100%.
That absolutely benefits the company, even though maybe I'm working less, but I'm getting way more done and it's way more efficient and it's way better code. So I think that's the kind of culture we need to bring to the workforce, rather than the culture of, this is the set time for everyone and good luck, just get it done. So because you're wasting your talented people, like, you're wasting some of your people that work better at, like, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. There's plenty of people that work better at night. Like, Matt, you yourself work better at night. One of our developers, back-end developers, he's way more efficient in the evening and stuff like that. Like, I know, like, I would say, like, a good portion of developers are better at night, but some of them don't have that opportunity. They have to, get up at 6 a.m., be tired all day, and get mediocre work done.
And, like, it's, again, I always struggle to, like, talk about stuff like this because I don't want people to think, like, oh, you're entitled, like, companies need to make money and, like, blah, 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 blah. Like, Mike and I do put our hours in. Like, yesterday, I had plans in the evening, but it was, like, later evening, like, I think 10 or p.m. or something. And it was maybe, like, 7. So I had dinner, I came back, sat on my computer, and I was just like, man, like, I got to do this thing for, sometime this week. Maybe I can just do it now. And I'm finished it, sent it off, it's over. And, I mean, that's better for our company. Now I, have more time to do, like, I wrote the show notes this week, for example, and stuff like that, right? Like, it just makes sense. And, like, there's my peak hours where I had, 2-3 hours here and there because they were kind of loose plans. So it's like, 2-3 hours where I was able to just completely finish off something that I thought I was going to finish midweek. And so then I can, either, take it, I literally mind-wise can take it easy and not rush the show notes. I don't have to be like, oh my God, like I got all this other crap to do. It's not like a big panic. And I think that's really critical. I think I like, this is also like a weird insider moment as well. So like, okay, having worked for BlackBerry, for example, I've seen a lot of just like the marketing material that we've all seen, right? But you see that with everyone. So for example, is like, if BlackBerry has a new messaging thing, I don't know, and they like post a thing, how like the marketing material, and this is for everybody, and I'll get into that, is they'll be like, hey, are we still on for tonight? Like that'll be like the poster. It's like a picture of a BlackBerry and yeah, we're still on. And then they like show like in one of the messages, like the new feature on BBM or whatever it is at the time. We still see that in things like, Samsung, not that exact scenario, obviously, but like we still see similar things on like Samsung advertisements and tablet advertisements where they're like, you could easily switch from your Canva app where you're working on your work posters right to Netflix, and stuff like that, right? Just whatever. And I was talking to my one friend like years ago, and like this conversation just brought me back to this, where I said to him, they never show the response to the message. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, they never show the response, because when that person asks, like, when that person responds to, are we still on at 6? The answer in 90% of circumstances is, sorry, I'm at work, or sorry, I can't, I'm working. And he was like, you're paraphrasing his response, but he's like, you're absolutely right. He's like, we all have to work, but he's like, that is usually the response. And he's like, they're effectively like, all marketing is like selling us on that downtime, but so many of us like unfairly don't have downtime, and that's not good. Like, that's really not good. And I think it's important, like you're saying, to identify your peak hours, but I think it's important also to identify your peak recreation. Like me, I know that I need a day here and there where I'm alone, or if I'm alone, like in person, maybe I'm talking to someone online, but I need a day where I need to stop and just play some games, watch some movies. Like Sunday, played a game all day with a buddy online. He went to bed, watched 2 movies, and that was my day. And like, I know I need that, right? I know I need days like that. But some people just don't even know what they want, and so they're just bouncing around between recreational activities. They don't even know, because their time is so limited. Like I've had discussions with people where they're like, "Oh, I worked this overtime. I did this. I did that. I did this." And then I'll say, like, "Why do you even own a TV?" Like, I wouldn't even own a TV. I would just like, but like people grin and like they think it's hilarious, but it's like, I would just save money. I wouldn't even have internet at home. Why the fuck would I bother? I'm going to own a bed, 1 couch, 1 lamp. I'm going to walk in, do my stuff, eat my TV dinner, go to bed. And then I'm going to wake up and go back to the office, because I'm sure they have Wi-Fi. But like, people laugh at that. But like, seriously, if you're going to limit yourself, because I have like some friends that will do this, where they like just pound the crap out of work, but then they take a long break. That's totally fine. But I have people that will pound the crap out of work, like just do tons and tons of hours, but it's nonstop, like all the time. No holidays, no none of this. And it's like, now they're trying to like ram all their recreational stuff in like the Christmas break or something. And they don't even know what they like. It's almost like they've forgotten what they've liked. They don't even know what they want. Do they want to play games? Do they want to watch a movie? Do you want to go to there? Do you want to go travel? Do you want to, and so they're bouncing around like crazy. And like, I'm kind of in terms of productivity, I'm sort of an extremist where I'm like, you either do it or you kind of don't. And I've like told people like, why the fuck, like, why do you even own a PlayStation? Like, get rid of your TV. It's a waste of money. Get rid of your PlayStation Plus. Get rid of your PlayStation. And just like, I don't know, go to work. Like, if that's what you're doing, but that's not healthy, right? But those people, like, I almost feel like it's unhealthy in a way for those people to chase, like, having that PlayStation, having that TV, having that entertainment system in their house is like making them like reminisce and like want to take a break. But then they just don't. And it's like, I almost feel like for me, it'd be more unhealthy for that to be calling to me and not do it. Now I understand, like, you might say like, well, I don't want to do that. Well, like, take the entertainment system and replace it with travel brochures or something. But like that is literally like if I was in a factory-esque office or literally in a factory and it was like 16 hours a day, that's it for me. Like I'm not doing anything. I'm not gonna buy anything. Like what the hell would I'm gonna buy a car to like commute, and then I'm gonna commute. I'm gonna come home and I'm not gonna have any furniture because I'm not gonna use it because I'm just gonna go to bed. And that's sad, but it's like, is having the entertainment system that I never turn on happier? Like But
it's perceivably happier. They could be thinking about it when they're off work, even though they're not using it. I could see that being a thing. But I kind of agree with you in the sense, like, I agree with you in the sense that, like, you shouldn't do that to yourself. Like, you shouldn't put yourself in a situation where you're not using any of your entertainment systems or any of your entertainment at all.
Or not traveling if you want to travel or something, right?
Or hiking or not hiking if you want to hike, or, you know, going to the gym if you want to go to the gym. Like if you're at the point where you're just not doing anything that's fun to you and your entire life is revolved around this work, I don't like, is it worth it? Like
some people love it, though. Like some people, like if you're a hiking enthusiast and you're a person that, like, I don't know, lays the gravel on the trail, I mean, power to you. Like, you're pretty much hiking all the time. So, like, of course, there's edge.
If you're loving but if you're hating your life while you're working and trying to do it just so that you can, you know, eventually have a better life, I would think about that a little bit, because, like, what's your eventually? Is it like 3 years down the line?
Exactly.
Is it 5 years down the line? And how do you know that something's not going to happen during that time where, like, you might lose that job and it might not be there, or you might have health issues or something like that? Like, I don't know. This is another philosophical thing that I don't want to get too deep into.
Yeah,
but
we're not psychologists, you know, by any means.
No, we're not. Exactly. But, like, it's one of those situations where, for me, I'd rather take the now. Like, I'd rather have the fun now rather than the fun later. Is that selfish? Like, I know some people might think that's selfish, but if I can balance the work and the fun, then why do it? Like, why do I have to put myself through that thing just for that little extra bit? I always have that thing where, like, as long as I'm, you know, clothed, roof over my head, having the food that I want to eat, and be able to afford the, like, you know, the vacation once a year or the vacation whenever I want to, like the small vacations, I don't need much more. Like, I'm not out here to grind to earn that extra, like, you know, $100 or that extra, like, you know, get to that point where, I don't know, millions of dollars or something like that. Like, I need to be just healthy, happy, whatever, and that's fine by me.
Right,
like,
but it would be sad if you wanted to travel more than once a year, and you, like, were just, like, constantly being like if I see, like, Mike and I are on a webcam right now, and I can see there's, like, a picture of a flower or something behind you. If that was, like, effectively a bunch of travel brochures, it'd be weird for them to be on the wall. But you know what I mean? Yeah. That would be, like, sad. You know, it's like
it would be. It would be sad. But it's not, so it's fine. Like, I think I've found that balance a little bit. Like, I do have a lot of phases where I grind a little bit too much, probably, but I do have phases where I, you know, take a week off, or, you know, have less, maybe half days during the week and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit more balanced in that sense than some people.
And everyone's going to have their imbalanced times where you're going to be super into something because maybe it bothers you. Like, sometimes something bothers you at work and you just need to want to get it done. Like, you're just like, fuck, I don't want to do this. Like, I'm just going to get this done this week. You know, of course there's going to be days like that. But
yeah, I think it's just, that's kind of how I feel about it. I feel that people should have that balance. You shouldn't be expected, again, to bring it back to the web news, you shouldn't be expected to just be at your desk 8 hours doing work, maybe, but even then you need your time off even during the workday. Like, you can't be on for 8 hours if you need to do intense problem solving coding. Like, sometimes you do need to take that 10-minute or 15-minute break, step away from the computer. It'll make you more productive. So I think those are the kinds of things you need to be wary of when you're going into a job. Don't expect to sit there and code for 8 hours. That's unreasonable for the employer to ask of you and for you to ask of yourself. Know that there's going to be a lot of time in between your coding and other things that you're going to be doing, communication stuff. You're going to be, like, you know, talking to team members. You're going to be doing all that stuff. So just don't be too hard on yourself. I think that's what I'll end it with. Don't be too hard on yourself. You know, limit the expectations that it's going to be just a grind fest.
And I think my capstone will be there's you know, so when we work with contractors or anything, there's like an unspoken amount of hours usually that like we expect. So if I tell someone to change a nav bar's, nav item, I don't expect them to, suddenly charge me for 15 and a half hours, right? So, but there's no like a direct spoken like, hey, 20 minutes only, bud. There's none of that. But I think in an office where like you're paid hourly, that sort of like expected amount of hours can sometimes be lost on people because maybe you're new to the job and you don't know your boss that well, or you don't even know the job that well. And one of the things that I was taught, and I've always used this, and like this has helped me with the figuring out the time thing, is I'll say, it doesn't matter what it is. When does this need to be done? When do you want this done? And if they say ASAP, I say, okay, what's the cutoff? Like push twice. Obviously, sometimes people won't do it, and then like whatever. But 90% of the time, I always actually get a cutoff date, or they tell me the first time, and it allows me to say, okay, like now I know that this is urgent. Now I know that this is not urgent. Now I know when this is due, and I'm going to start working on it now, tomorrow, next week. When can I start working on it? Doesn't matter how small it is. Like even if it's really just like, hey, can you call Jim? Be like, sure. When do you want me to call him? When's the cutoff? Like what's this about? And I don't know whether some bosses will get mad, but all my bosses, I think it was my boss that told me that like years ago, and I've always used that. And that removes that anxiety and ambiguity, because assuming your workplace isn't toxic, more or less you are judged upon how well you completed the job, was it done on time, in a reasonable amount of time, whatever, right? Those metrics of like job completion, not, hey, like you did a great job, but you weren't sitting at your desk for those 8 hours. Like what the hell? Like, it's like, who cares? Like the job was done. Yeah, but some people would be like, hey, you could have been done a job and a half. Like, what's going on here? But it's like, that wasn't what was expected of me. And they would still be like, no, 8 hours, bud, So that's my little tip / capstone / I'm going to run the conclusion unless Mike has any other comments.
Nope, runner up.
Alrighty, well, we'd like to take this opportunity to thank our $3 tier patron, Sean from RabbitWorks JavaScript. Find him at youtube.com/RabbitWorksJavaScript. Garrick from Local Path Computing and Web Design. Find him at localpathcomputing.com. Ryan Gatchell from Blue Black Digital. Find him at blueblackdigital.com. Chris from Self-Made Web Designer. Find him at selfmadewebdesigner.com. Tim from The Web Hacker. Find him at thewebhacker.com. DL Ford from dlford.io, and Bib Hashdash from Twitter via @Bib Hashdash. Remember, we're on that Patreon, obviously. That's patreon.com/HTML and we're going to let this outro sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media. On Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.